I'd now like to ask Derek Burke to come up and give us his address. Please welcome Derek.
Firstly, thank you. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that we're holding this event on Ghana stolen land, whose sovereignty was never ceded, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. IPAN's alternative self-defence policy was introduced by Bevan Ramsden at the 2024 National Conference in Western Australia and formally adopted in early 2025 by the National Coordinating Committee. My purpose this afternoon is to refresh people's knowledge and understanding of what this policy is about and what it hopes to achieve. So let's look at the reasons for an alternative self-defence policy and what it would look like. Where to from here? Australia's involvement in the United States overseas wars in the last 80 years was the impetus for coming up with the self-defence force concept. The US domination of Australia, politically, economically, militarily, has shaped our Australian Defence Force into an offensive military operation. To achieve a truly independent self-defence for Australia, we have to break the control of the US has over our nation. I've gone backwards, sorry. Okay. For Australia to become a truly independent nation, it must do some honest history of the invasion of the First Nations land. This requires non-Indigenous Australia to accept the history of dispossession and genocide and not deny it. The frontier wars must be acknowledged as the first wars fought on Australia soil by British colonialism and continued by the Australian state. Yeah, going all over the place here. Oh, God. Okay, there we go. Good. Okay. I'm better than I hold it. The first line of defence would be diplomacy. If Australia could release itself from the grip of the US, we could pursue diplomacy to resolve international conflicts and develop positive and peaceful relations with all countries without resort to war. This would be based on equality, mutual respect, as opposed to military might. Oh, God, don't. I want to be on slide 5, folks. What's...
Do you want me to maybe...
Yeah. Okay, thank you. What is required for a self-defence policy? IPAN envisions a non-nuclear, armed, non-aligned policy for Australia's Defence Force. Military alliances are preparation for war, whereas pursuing a non-alignment is a step towards peace. Australia would avoid involvement in any wars between other countries. Australian territory could not be used in such wars. This requires the closure of foreign military bases on our soil. In effect, Australia would end the alliance with the US. 6. The role of our military should be to defend Australia effectively against hostile incursions into our sovereign territory. Australia is ideally placed geographically to develop such a policy for self-defence. The Echidna military strategy can be applied. This kind of defence is so prickly, like the Echidna, the cost and pain to an enemy to invade Australia would become too exorbitant. The primary role of the Australian Defence Force should be to safeguard the Australian territory and its approach waters within Australia's 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone. This in contrast to what our military does presently, sending Australian troops off to expeditionary wars led by the US Empire. Presently, there are no threats to Australian sovereignty coming from our northern neighbours, as our right-wing pundits erroneously argue, the only threat to Australia is the United States, whose war with China will make us a target. Expelling the United States military bases is the real dangerous threat of facing Australia. Slide 7, thanks. A self-reliant defence force requires the reconfiguration, reform, retraining and equipping of a new type of ADF. This could only be done under a truly independent Australia. Currently, the ADF is interoperable and interchangeable with the US military. Historically, it has acted as an extra battalion for the British Empire and now US imperialism. There will need to be extensive development of sovereign, publicly owned Australian manufacturing and industrial base to provide support to defence. There is no place for private or foreign-owned arms manufacturers who have created a military-industrial complex for profit. There will need to be the development of all essential services and critical supply chains. A noticeable flaw that became obvious during the COVID pandemic and the oil crisis resulting from the US and Israel war against Iran. Currently, Australia military supply chains are controlled and run by the US weapons corporations. When necessary, defence systems and material unavailable in Australia will be sourced from countries with similar defence postures and foreign policies close to our own. 8, thank you. A common misconception of non-alignment is that it is a retreat into isolationism. To the contrary, it would involve active involvement in international affairs opposing wars of aggression and occupation, hosting meetings between belligerents, acting as a mediator in disputes between countries and peace building in our region and wider. There are 120 countries who are members of the non-aligned movement. Australia would not be isolated. It would be in good company. 9, thank you. Australia would contribute to the United Nations peace... Yeah, okay, almost there. Australia would contribute to the United Nations peacekeeping and humanitarian operations as its contribution to regional and global peace. Australia would cultivate positive relationships with all countries, especially with non-aligned countries, such as Southeast Asian and others in our region. As opposed to financially bribing Pacific Island states into security treaties, which Australia could not realistically achieve militarily, this ocean of peace is in effect shoring up the Pacific, or to use a colloquialism, the American lake, for the US, with Australia paying the bill. 10. A truly independent Australia committed to non-alignment would, IPAN believes, inspire a sweeping voluntary mobilisation in support of both military and civil defence. Just a bit further back. Okay. Conscription will not be necessary. Conscientious objection to participating in any war will be respected and made a legal right. 11. And the final slide. The pursuit of an independent foreign policy grounded in non-alignment and territorial self-defence is effectively strangled by Washington's grip on the country. The challenge is enormous. We have the state, corporate media, big foreign capital, think tanks, the 3 war parliamentary parties, indeed the repressive state apparatus to confront. These compradors and quislings will be no easy match to deal with. Therefore, Australia's aggressive, subservient military posture demands a clear alternative, a genuine self-defence. Therefore, that means taking the case directly to the Australian public. By getting out into the suburbs, through the use of independent media, which has widely embraced the idea of a genuine self-defence, and building alliances as we have with groups such as the Greens. In the end, only a massive, united, broad-based people's movement can break Washington's grip on this country. Only that kind of pressure will force the shift to non-alignment, the only path to real security and from freedom from foreign wars. That is our mission, and it should be non-negotiable. Thank you.